Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. In today's video we're working on my 2008 BMW 335i with the N54 motor, and I'm going to show you guys how to install a set of factory location inlets. These are silicone inlets that replace your stock inlets that are quite restrictive. I went with a supplier called MMP, and it comes with all the hardware you need, including clamps, etc. to actually install these. So basically what we're trying to do here is get rid of these factory inlets that are restrictive. They pinch down at the front and at the rear and make things a little bit restrictive. So we're going to start on the top here and remove some of this hardware to get clear access. So we'll start right here, removing this intake snorkel. You might as well get the engine cover removed. This is going to have to come off anyway. 2 5mm Allens. At the front and back. Next up, I'm going to remove these dual cone intakes. These blow-off valve connections are going to have to come off. I want to get this line out of the way for the brake booster. Set this aside. You can see the actual inlet to the front turbo right here, and if we follow it along, you'll see there's a couple torque screws there, and it snakes around the front of the motor to the actual turbo itself. So I believe this fan shroud is going to have to come out of the way to get to those. Hopefully you can make it out. I'm just using a regular 3/8 drive with a T30 on the end, and without taking this fan shroud out I had plenty of room. So I figured, you know what, this may have to come out for another step, I'm not sure, but for now I'm going to try to minimize the amount of equipment I get out of the way. So I was able to remove or loosen up the bolts, both of them. There's two, just with this ratchet here. So I just got that out without needing to remove this fan shroud. So that's one of them right there. Let's go for the next one. To give you an idea, here's where I'm working. I just took that out. Now I'm going to take this next one out. I'm basically just sticking my hands in from the top and getting that out. Got that other one out. I dropped it, but it fell on the tray, so I'll get that when I go down there. It looks like one of these rad hoses clips into the actual charge pipe. I've unclipped those hoses out of the actual charge pipe. You can see there's a little snap-in type of clamp there, and it's really started to free up. Looks like the only connection left is to the actual snout on the turbo. I'm going to remove these two canisters out of the way to give myself some room. There's a 10mm up at the top. There's a 10mm down here. And there's one over here. I'm getting my magnet now to reach down in there and collect them. And the other one is here. Two. And you have your boost lines going to the bottom, or vacuum lines. So we'll move that out of the way. As far as I can tell, there's no clamp on the front of the actual charge pipe. You can see I just kind of routed the rad hose on the other side of the actual clamp here. It's free. So now it's just a bunch of wiggling. See if I can get enough clearance to get that out. Okay, so I tried. I got that loosened up, but I can't get it out. without removing that fan shroud. So I'm going to get it ready from the top, and then we'll take care of it, the rest of it from underneath. It's just not going to be worth trying to finagle around that. Even if you could, you'll spend more time doing so. So we're going to take this connector off here. Electrical connector. I'm going to take this upper rad hose transfer pipe and move it out of the way. Be conscious of the fact that these can snap right here quite easily. So you want to make sure you don't put too much strain on that when you move it out of the way. I've actually had mine snap off and I've replaced the actual hose. Over on the passenger side there's a T20 you gotta remove. Next we'll have to go under the car, remove the lower splash shield to get to one of the bolts for the actual fan shroud underneath. Alright, so I have the car jacked up from the front, right on that center brace, and I have jack stands at the jacking points so that I'll have plenty of working room from underneath. So let's go ahead and take the shield off underneath. There's the lower shield removed and that bolt that I dropped before. Let's get that out of our way. This is the T20 Torx from below. That must be removed before you can lift up on the fan shroud from above. That way you can pull the fan shroud away from this cooler here. Now I can go from the top and try to get it out. Alright, so here we are from the top. I'm usually able to get this out without removing the upper rad hose. Just gotta kind of finagle it around it. So now that we got those bolts out of the way, we'll lift up on this side. So this is what I'm working with now. I'm just caught up on this hose here and then I'll be able to pull this out. Alright, so I just got this free. I had to just, main thing is these two rad hoses in this line kind of get in your way, but if you stay patient and keep finagling with it, you'll be able to get it out. Patience, don't use common sense. There's a charge pipe out of the car without too much grief. You can see this piece kind of slides into here. Didn't have to break anything or snap anything like some of the instructions show. And it really wasn't too bad getting the front one out. I know the back one's a whole different story. But you can see how restrictive the factory inlet is. Here's a comparison. This is the factory front stock charge pipe. And this is the MMP charge pipe. You can see if you look at it straight on here, it's like nearly twice as wide, and it's kind of, the points end up at the same place, but it's kind of routed to get away from your belts and whatnot from the looks of it. So let's set these up with clamps and then we'll go from there. We're going to start routing this into position. Alright, so I'm just playing around with final positioning now, just to give you guys an idea. I want to make sure that it can sit naturally away from the pulleys without needing zip ties if possible, so I'll show you guys what I end up with. Alright, so I have that clamp bottomed out. It's a little tricky because the clamp provided is basically one turn too small, where if you loosen it where you can actually get that thing on easily, it will just come undone. But basically you have like one turn where it will fall apart, and then if you make it snug enough where it will actually stay together, you can barely slide on the actual coupler. And if you look here, it's kind of hard to make out, but you can see the actual, if you look in there, you can see the actual metal wastegate right there where my screwdriver is. You gotta get this clamp past that, or you'll never be able to slide it on together. So you gotta kind of stick this to the edge of the tube, angle it past that, and then slide the tube into place and then tighten down. Otherwise you'll be fidgeting around with this, trying to get past here. It will get stuck up against here, and then the more you push it, the clamp will just come undone because it's barely big enough to work on this application. So just keep that in mind. Keep the clamp right at the tip of the actual tube as you slide in, angle past here, and then you can kind of line things up. But that wasn't bad at all, actually. It's pretty easy to get to that point. And now that that's pushed all the way down and bottomed out, we can see where this thing naturally wants to rest. And just looking at things as they are, it naturally would love to just sit up against these pulleys and chew itself apart. So that's factory location, basically. If you just let things be like that, you'll be rubbing up against pulleys. So you're gonna have to pull this back, and we're gonna have to find a way to secure the actual tube away from the pulleys. But when you do that, you got room here, ample room. There's no pulleys besides this one and the alternator pulley to get anywhere close, but still. Now this coolant hose actually has to tuck in behind, like so. That helps. It looks like it's got its natural shape. It's not getting kinked up in any way. And this line here has to snap in. So that snaps in, kind of holds things in place now that we don't have those clamps anymore. Now, with that tucked around here, we have some room to bring it forward and have some decent clearance away from the pulleys. And we're going to do that by probably zip tying the actual tube here. It does touch against the upper radiator hose, and I don't see a good way to get around that. So let's just keep that in mind, that you're not going to be able to do much about that. But it's not like it's too much pressure that it's going to cause stress. So we'll probably have to zip tie it to the actual tube, or find a good way to keep it out of the way. Now, I want to button this side up with the air filter so that we can finalize here, and then we'll go around to the back side. Alright, so I don't know if the kit's missing hardware or you have to improvise, but there's no way with the hardware I have to connect from this to here. So I have to find a way to get this piece off and find a good solution for securing this to this. If you try, you can actually rotate this and pull it off. Alright, with a bunch of pulling I was able to get that off. So not the end of the world. So this may seem a little ghetto, but I had to build up the circumference of this with some electrical tape so that it will fit into here snug. Yeah, it's nice and tight. I could clamp that, or I can try using my heat gun to shrink that. I think I'll try that first. And then this is a nice tight fit into the actual tube. It'll just push on and hold itself so it won't come out. I have to check the instructions, or maybe talk to the manufacturer about what they intend you to do here. Why didn't it just come with some clip-on adapter that would just basically slide into here, use a clamp, and then you click your thing into there? Am I missing hardware? Either way, if they don't give you that and they expect you to figure it out yourself, there's a good way to go about it. Right now it's like it's in there good anyway. I'll give this a shrink with my heat gun to really bite down on there, and then we'll reinstall this part. So I just ran my heat gun around this until it's got a bit of a shine to it. That's what they do at the factory to give you a really strong connection. It would be about as hard to remove as the factory piece that I just pulled off. So it's as good as that. If anything, I'll throw a clamp on from the outside if it's problematic, but we should be fine. So now I can get my blow-off valve line here. But this doesn't look bad actually, it's nice and clean. So I'm fine with this at the end of the day. We'll clip this into its factory location. I'll insert this. Alright, so I got that inserted into there. Let's take a look at what that looks like. It kind of just bites into the actual tube and you can't pull it out easily. I may try to bottom that right out, but just want to see how things rest in their factory location. So this is going to want to keep the filter right about here, and our distance from the pulleys is actually pretty good. Even if it tried to pull in, it would throw everything. This is going to kind of fight it. So we'll keep that out of the way. And I'll probably run a zip tie around here to here, around this fitting here, just to kind of keep it from being able to pull forward. And I'll try to bottom that right out and then we'll move on. Feels super solid, but just for good measure, I put a couple zip ties around this. And this is pretty much bottomed out to where it needs to be. This has got a good seal because of the shape of that fitting. So that's done. I got the filter back in place just to see how things are going to sit. Seems pretty natural. Plenty of clearance from the pulleys in its natural position. So that's fine. I'm just going to run my zip ties around here now. So I'm not a big fan of running zip ties, obviously, on my car, but you know what? When you're running non-OEM components that are designed to give you some more power, you have to improvise. And in this case here, I just have it wrapped around this loosely, just so that it can't pull forward. It kind of gets held in place naturally. This kind of pushes it forward. Many things would make it so that it's very unlikely to come in contact with the pulleys, but I got ample clearance, if you can see, and everything's buttoned up. So I'm going to put everything back together from here because we're technically done with this. Worst case, if I can't finish the rear inlet today, then I have the front done. Alright, so I'm under the car now so we can tackle the rear inlet, and I want to soak these bolts in PB Blaster before we attempt to remove them, so I'm going to do that now. And FYI, I already have downpipes on this car, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to rotate one of them a little bit away, because on left turns I was, without adjusting that bracket back there, I was getting rubbing. Since doing so, I basically never get rubbing, but you know, under the odd instance I can, so I'm going to adjust it now. Now I have this O2 sensor removal tool that I bought a long time ago that I'm going to use here. It's very handy, it just slips over. If you don't have that, you can use a 7/8 or 22 mm wrench. But we're going to try to crack this free. There we go, came free. And just let that hang down. That would have gotten in our way. I'm going to try those 13 mil bolts now. Wasn't too bad. For the upper bolts, I just used 3/8 to loosen, which is a little easier. So I haven't taken any braces or anything out of the way, but sadly enough I found one of my V-band clamps was just finger tight. So whoever installed these before I owned the car didn't make sure that this was tight, which may, I guess it wasn't really causing too much of a problem, but that's not that ideal. So shouldn't be that easy, but I got the bolt. There's an O2 sensor on the side of this pipe that I'm going to go after now. Alright, so I was able to get that oxygen sensor off with my tool. There's one of the downpipes. As you can see. Recommend that you guys buy this O2 sensor tool. This is what's made it possible to avoid taking too many things out of the way thus far. And the reason, I know this is for the left pipe because it's got this metal shielding around it, so I don't have to really worry about labeling this for now. And I leave it in that bunched up position so that when I screw things back in, the pipe's not bound up. So keep that out of the way. That is the rear O2 sensor. So I'll try to go for that now. I was able to get that O2 sensor out of the way. Now I'm going to try that V-band clamp that's in focus right now. I'm wondering how tight that will be, considering that the other one was quite loose from whoever installed these previously. And I just tucked the O2 sensor behind the shield here so that I know it's the one on the right. But you may want to label those. This shield here is the only thing that's would have really been in the way, and it's kind of bent out of the way because whoever installed these previously just left it like that. So I'm going to try that V-band right now. I just tried this rear one. It was basically finger loose. I had to get it slightly started by wrench, but otherwise it was pretty loose, sadly. That's why I don't like letting other people work on my car, because this is before I owned this car that these were installed, but it's just, you can tell whoever did it didn't give a crap. They shoved that shield out of the way, mangled it so that you can't even bend it back into normal position, and left things loose. Anyway, I can deal with it now that I'm dropping them. And something to keep in mind is, and this could be why I'm avoiding, I don't need to remove too many things ultimately, but when you're putting this back together, you got to make sure that you orient the V-band in such a way that it won't interfere with the wastegate arm, because you can put this in such a way that the wastegate won't be able to work properly. So keep that in mind when you're removing the V-bands and putting them back into place. So I'll get that removed and then I'll show you when I'm dropping that pipe. Here comes the rear pipe. With the clamp still on there. So now we have tons of access to see what's up. And basically we're working back here. You can see the snout right there. What's going on in the turbo. So now we got to try to remove some bolts from the top side, but you know, this is where we're going to be installing the clamp, etc. That's as much room as I need here. So I didn't need to drop my I didn't need to drop any of this stuff actually. Just keep that in mind that you guys may want to take these two steering rack bolts out and slide the rack forward and drop this V-brace to maybe give yourselves a bit more room to get leverage on removing those V-band and O2 sensors if they're on there tight or they're original, never been touched. In my case, someone put on downpipes, therefore it made it easy to get access to them and I should be able to tighten them effectively. But if you watch any other video showing you how to install downpipes, that will tell you how to get all this stuff out of the way. But maybe someone can use this video to try to avoid taking too much stuff out of the way unnecessarily. So here's the rear inlet. If you look back here, there is a small connector, like so, and you see how this is installed here. Looks like there's a couple tabs holding this in place. Alright, got that removed. It's for the PCB, I believe. Just gotta get a pick tool on either side to be able to get it past all this. Beautiful. Looks like I've cleared things. Fuck off. Fucking stupid ass light. Alright, so that's a little finicky. But I was able to remove that successfully. As you can see, the piece has to get transferred over to the new tube, and I believe it just sticks in there and then clamps around here, and that goes back on the actual valve cover. Something like that. So I'm gonna put this over here now. Now you can see the rear tube here, and there's a couple screws at the back side here, just like in the front, that have to be removed, and just make them out there. I'm going to try to do that now. So lift this harness up and out of the way for now, and see how much room we're going to need to get back there. I was able to get these two T30 Torx loosened by using this. As you can see, it's moving. It's just a small vice grip with a T30 bit on the end. There's barely any room back there, so that worked. I can come back here and get the rest by hand, or so I thought. But anyway, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to finish getting those two screws removed. Alright, got those two removed, like I said, just with this tool. Here's your cover for the ECU. I removed that just because this thing was kind of annoying. Right here is digging into my arm while I was working back there, and that gave me like a 1/4 inch extra room, and every millimeter counts right now. So that's removed. The pipe actually naturally fell by gravity. So the only thing kind of holding it right now is it sticking on the snout underneath the car. So let's go underneath and slide it off. Here we are underneath the car. I'm going to try to slide this off. So that's slid off now, as you can see. Okay, I'm looking at that tube here, and because of the way it angles at a 90-degree angle, and it's hard plastic, there's no way to pull that straight up without cutting it. So what I'm going to do is cut it right about there, right where it goes, it transitions to like a flat section, and we'll pull this piece off from down here and then pull it straight up. I am just going to use a hacksaw. Here's my ghetto knife solution. I slid the actual snout right back on the turbo so it doesn't move around. That's what I'm going to try. As you can see, that's what I'm doing. It'd be nice if I had a sawzall, but I don't. So I'm going to keep at this for a while, and then I'll show you when I'm done. Alright, I sawed most of the way through that. I'm going to try pulling from the top now. Here's the aftermath. After sawing, took about 20 minutes after everything. Would help if you had a sawzall. hopefully enough room to get that out. As you can see, that's how I cut things. So you can't save that piece. To be able to get it out, you have to cut it. There's just no way, unless you're gonna drop the subframe, take the engine mounts off, tilt the motor forward, etc. It's not worth it. So I'm gonna get prepared to install this piece now. I've been told that you want to coat this section in some Vaseline or something to help it slide down in there through that gap. So I'm going to do that now. I put Vaseline on the actual tube, and I'm going to try maneuvering it into place. That turned out easier than I was expecting. For now, that can just live there, but I need to show you what I did underneath. And might as well take a clamp with me, the larger one. The Vaseline probably made a world of difference. Definitely recommend that. So I found it sitting up above there actually. And I had to use my 2 fingers to get inside of it and actually just pull down by hand. I didn't need any rope or string or anything to pull it down. I was able to get my 2 fingers inside the tube, and you could feel it slide, and definitely felt slimy because of the Vaseline. So I'm going to insert that clamp now and try to tighten that down. Alright, so we're on back here. As you can see, a couple things to keep note of. If you see that bracket right there, the factory inlet slits in between there, and on this it sits on the outside of it. So you kind of have to bend it inward and out of the way of the actual aftermarket inlet when you're sliding things down. That once you push it inward, it will allow you to push this actual piece on. Gives you an idea of the routing and the type of clearance you have down here. And that's the position that I had to put the clamp in. It's kind of hard to get this thing to focus down here, but hopefully you can make that out. As you can see, that's where the screw head, ended up. So all in all, I was able to do it by hand. It was a little difficult. Even with lubricating it, I would recommend you lubricate all the way to the end of it, all of this, not just the middle section. I thought like that elbow really needed a little more grease and whatnot to make things easier. And another thing I did was I removed these 2 bell housing bolts and removed this piece here just to make it easier so I can actually get my hand on here and push it into position. And I kept that clamp off right until the end because it would kind of bind up against the actual transmission. But there's enough clearance to be able to slide it over and put it back together once you finalize its position. So that way you can get your hand right on here and just use all your leverage to push. I used a pry bar back here gently to kind of coax it into position without putting too much pressure to hurt the actual hose. But getting this out of the way really helped with getting your hand up in here to push and help it get into position. So I'm going to start putting things back together down here now. As a quick FYI, I left this actual bracket out because it doesn't do anything with the aftermarket downpipes, and it presses up and pinches that actual tube. There's no need to keep that in place in my instance because it just interferes anyway. So I just put those 2 bolts back in. They bottom out by finger all the way to the end, so you don't need washers or anything, and just give it a kick snug up and leave them out. To take a little break from under the car, I came up and threw the DCIs back in and routed my blow-off valves. That's in relatively the same spot as stock, and like I showed you guys, I just used the adapter that came with it and made my own little solution there. And same for back here. It's just normally stock, it sits on top of here, so I had to just kind of, everything seems like it's not bound up, it's all in a good spot. It's all routed fine, it's sitting in a different spot than stock, but it's in there good. So everything's back to normal. It kind of looks just as it would stock, besides this tube showing here. So I'm gonna go finish up below. I picked up some new exhaust gaskets. It's got a steel reinforcement, so less likely to leak. That's the part number there. Got it up my local O'Reilly's. It was $1.50 a piece. I'm getting ready to put the V-band clamps back into place, and I'm going to need to get the steering rack out of my way. It's just going to be a little too tough, so you might as well take these off. So we're looking at one of the actual bolts for the steering rack. One right there. The size is going to be E14. And up at the top, it's going to be 16 mm. Up at the top I have my wrench inserted just like that, as you can see. But I'm using a 5/8 because it's the closest thing I could find that should work just the same. That's that. Now we want to pull this out of position just to give ourselves some room. You don't want to pull too much because you could potentially pull the steering shaft out or the actual harness. You could bind that up against something, so we're just pulling it forward to get clearance here. So the goal is to get this out of this position here. I'm not able to get it down or far enough ahead with the current position of the steering wheel, so I'm going to try turning the wheel. I'm just turning it by hand to see if that helps. Now I have the wheel cranked the other way, left. As you can see, the wheels are rotated. Let's see if that does things. And yeah, that's what you need to do. When you crank the wheel left, it gives you clearance. That should be enough. I don't have to go too far. Just enough to be able to stick your hand in there to be able to put the V-bands back on. I'll give you an idea of how much more working room we have now. You can stick your hand right in between here now and get right to the actual downpipe. And something I'd be meaning to tackle is I want to make sure that this is cleared from the actual subframe as much as possible. So I'm going to get things situated now. And also we got to watch out for the position of the V-band clamp versus the actual wastegate actuator arm. We don't want them binding up together. Here's a better shot of our working room now. You can see clearly into there. So by moving this rack forward, it made a big difference. As an FYI, if you look inside there, you can see the position of that clamp. You want to make sure that that bolt isn't in such a way that it stops the wastegate from returning to its normal position, which is all the way forward. So mine is all the way forward and it wouldn't make contact with that. So that's one of the things you got to watch out for, the way you position that clamp on the actual downpipe. So I'm going to button things down, but that's the approximate position you want yours to end up in. Just as an FYI, I lowered those two bolts that hold that bracket to the transmission mount for the exhaust to drop about that much. Otherwise you can't get the left downpipe in place. So leave that down and out of the way. All stuff you really would be doing while taking things apart. Mine just came apart so easily that I didn't have to deal with this until I'm reassembling. So keep that in mind. You gotta let that drop down. Drop those two bolts. I wouldn't touch the actual middle hanger over there because they can strip out, you're better off going after those two. Now, for the sake of creating as much clearance as possible between the subframe and the actual pipe, I rotated this way, away from the actual subframe, and then I bottomed out that V-band. And now, this is actually not tightened down. The V-band is loose, that way I can kind of rotate this into final position. This is a fixed position since I clamped it in such a way to remove distance, to create distance between here and here. So now I'm going to use this pipe here to pull this stuff back together with the new gaskets and hardware, and then I'll tweak this pipe by rotating it slightly to get it to line up perfectly after getting this into position. FYI, these gaskets are the perfect size. They match up perfectly with the factory exhaust. So now that that's tight, now we can tweak this, line it up perfectly so that we can lock down that V-band. Alright, so we're buttoned up over here. Now I can go over and tighten up that V-band up at the front. You can see the V-band right there. You don't have to worry too much about clearance up at the front here. It's a pretty wide open area. So I'm just going to button that down now. Alright, so I'm winding down. I got my O2 sensors back in place. Up at the front here. Everywhere back into its original position. I'm going to replace that exhaust hanger bracket and put the steering rack back into place. Alright, so I've restored those bolts over there. The nuts are 13 and the bolt part is a E10, or you can just use an 8mm socket on the other end to hold it tight. So that's back into position now. Now let's put the steering rack back into place. Alright, so we're in the home stretch. Everything's back together. Just gotta put this lower spat shield on and we'll start things up, make sure everything seems decent, and summarize. Alright, we're all back together. Here's the final result. This is what they look like. They don't really stand out very much. Kind of looks OEM besides the white labels there. I know I gotta detail my engine bay. It's one thing I haven't done on this car. Could use a good cleaning. I'm definitely gonna get to that. And here's the back tube. So when you pop the hood, it just kind of looks as it would had you had your stock inlets in place if you have DCI cone filters. So we're going to start it up now, make sure everything feels smooth and there's no leaks. I'm going to save my impression for the next video where I just review having inlets all together and also use data logging via MHD flasher to see how much power the car's making through virtual dyno. I made another video with the stock inlets, everything else in the car being the same, and it was like 370 wheel, 413 torque without any type of custom tuning, just an off-the-shelf tune with these intakes or inlets. We're going to see what type of difference it makes. So look out for my next video where I give you an impression of the actual inlets and also do a virtual dyno to see how much power it's making. Alright, so it's the next day. I haven't started the car since I finished the work. I was a little late and didn't want to make too much noise. So I'm going to give it a first start now to see how things sound. everything sounds good, I'll just go underneath and make sure that there's no leaks or anything that were disturbed, like power steering lines, etc. And then we'll take it for a drive. So this will conclude this video. The next video you see is going to be me talking about how it drives and give you my initial impressions, as well as we'll do some data logging with MHD to see how the car's performing. We're going to download the CSV file and interpret the results on my computer like I did before to see if we picked up any power. So that pretty much concludes this video. Thanks for watching and good luck. Wow.